Hello people. I wanted to go through quickly a situation I have found as a manifester. Firstly, here's my key. This is my simple visual key. The first one on the far left is the manifester. They've got the defined throat, the energized throat, with those lines coming off it, and no sacral, an undefined sacral. And then you have the generator manifester, the generator, and the projector at the end. Obviously, projectors sometimes have defined throats, but for this example, we are not defining the throat. Anyway, the manifester is from the traditional human design, and I do think this is true. The manifester is the only one designed to initiate. So they're the ones who designed to just do things and not respond to anything. With some of the other types, like the two generator types, they respond to something happens in the world, they're like, do I want to do this, do I not want to do this, and then they go with it. Whereas the manifester doesn't really have that sacral response. And I relate very strongly to not having that sacral response. People have often, especially when they have decided that some social situation should be a certain way, have often tried to give me something to respond to, and there's just no response. I have a lot of thoughts about how the types are the way they are, tracing the way they are from very young. Like, I theorize that when the manifestor born, they're like, this works, this doesn't work, and then they all come to the same conclusion, because there's only one conclusion you can come to with that energy type. And in relation to my other ideas, breaking down that some centers are more relevant to free will than others, I have a whole idea about how the entire mechanics works. But that's not for this video. I'm really going with the basic human design ideas. Like when I first heard human design, when I was far too young to think things through and come up with my own ideas about things, I just followed what was said. And when that happened, I can't remember my age. It must have been in the teens somewhere. It was before 20, I'm pretty sure. It was before I left school. Like, it was before I entered sixth form. So it was before 16 even. And I remember very strongly that people would be trying to get me to respond to things, and people would be kind of controlling me. And it felt very, very unnatural. And because I found the human design, I had a kind of vocabulary about why this wasn't quite correct. So the manifestor doesn't have the sacral. So I assume, this is just on the fly, but I assume a big part of the sacral being the way they are. The sacral is quite tough. The sacral people they have a toughness to them. I'm not saying they are actually tough, but there's an animalistic sense there. And I think what it is when someone puts something forth to the sacral will respond, and they won't really be controlled. It's not really controlled because they are tough enough to say, no, that doesn't work for me. Even if they are not saying it explicitly, it's a very push and pull thing, and so there's no real problem, there's no social disharmony that comes from that. Both the manifestor and the projector, on the other hand, they have a kind of weakness at the sacral. Now, when you don't have a sacral, you don't relate quite as emotionally to the world. Of course, we are going to have to exempt the emotional center from this because that's very complex. But you don't have this instinctual animalistic sense that generators have. And so what you're left with is, how do I put the world together? And it becomes more of a thought-based cerebral thing. And this is why projectors become so wise. Because without that initial animalistic, instinctual, in-out, this is right, this is wrong, this animalistic generator sacral thing, you have to rely on thought. You have to put things together in a lot more thought-based ways. So when I first found the human design, I would watch again and again as the generator types would kind of tell me to do something, or I would not be able to respond in a way that would actually explain what I was thinking, and it would all go badly wrong. If I manifested something, if I said, hey, let's do this, and people went with it, it always went very, very well. If I said, hey, let's do this, and people kind of ignored me, which often happened, remember, less animalistically powerful, then of course nothing would happen. But that was the main when I would try and manifest. And then the other thing was when other people insisted on something, and that just went badly, badly wrong. And that was partly because I couldn't articulate my priorities. I couldn't articulate why that wasn't quite correct. So I think there's a lot of power dynamics here. I think there's this thing with the generators where they have the kind of world worked out. I think generators are fairly happy with the world as it is. I know there's a lot of very bad things happening, but they have enough of the animalistic hierarchy and things working out in their favor to not be worried about this. And this isn't not self. I didn't like the way Rahu used the term not self, because it's literally just anything I don't happen to like is not self. And that term doesn't really mean anything. It is what it is. It's what they've chosen. It's what they like. It's what they have decided to carry on with. And if it isn't ideal, then that needs to be compared to an ideal standard. That needs to be articulated why that is. There's no of this whole kind of mysticism, not self kind of confusion. Anyway, we are living in a very confused, conditioned reality. And there are projectors, I think, that push very, very hard against the generator world as it is. I think the thing with the manifestor, though, is that the manifestor really has to bring in new energy. They're bringing in something that's very new and often kind of theological. You'll find a lot more manifestors that are kind of praying and stuff, I suspect. Not in a traditional Christian church, but the energy type lends itself to that kind of thought. And what it is they're trying to do is initiate this new thing into experience. But if this is going to upset the generator animalistic hierarchy, and the generators don't want to listen, then nothing can be done from that place. I don't take this idea, as I talked about in my last video, that if you follow the strategy, everything's an authority, everything's going to be fine. I don't think that's the case. I think that you might do better than you were doing before, but I think that the entrenched power dynamics in the real world will still stop you no matter how well you follow your design. I think that's too magical thinking. I just had to get up and walk around for a little while because of pins and needles in my feet. And while I was doing that, I had another insight, which feels like it was destined to be here. So this is not strictly relevant to this discussion, but it is relevant to a discussion that might come later. I just thought it was important even so. I think when people start out with a chart, and before they found the human design chart, the world forms around them in a way that relates to their energy and strategy. I mean, that's obvious. So I think it's likely, not definitely, but likely that the generator, even when they do go out and manifest, when they initiate and push things, when they're in that not self place, there's part of them that really just wants to receive the thing to respond to first. That we want what our designs are, and to the same extent I was saying that I don't respond to things. I don't think the manifestor really wants to fit in with people at the end of the day, because I think this is kind of going back to a Nietzschean idea. I don't think we actually form our desires and our thoughts without them having been informed first. So Nietzsche said there was a kind of part of us that's a kind of instinct that forms before the thought forms, and that's why every philosopher's ideas are a reflection of themselves. Well, I think something might be going on here with the human design, the projector, even when they are trying to initiate, doesn't want to initiate. They want to be seen as the sages that they are, or that we hope they are if they've made good decisions. And like I was saying, I don't have a response. I don't respond in the way a generator does. So for that same reason, I don't have that need to fit in. I've known people that seem to be flying against their strategy a little bit, but the part of them that is their strategy is so much stronger than the part that isn't. If you have a generator that's manifesting, they badly want to fit in. And they do the manifesting out of a kind of frustration. And that is important because I think it comes to the way we form words. When I talk about one of the issues I've had as a manifestor in just a little bit, you can see how, from a manifestor's perspective, a term like forgiveness means change your behavior because the manifestor behaves in a certain way. Right? If they have completely forgiven someone, forgiven whatever that means nowadays, then they go and they talk to them, and that's just the way it is. There's nothing in the way of doing that. Whereas for a projector, they might wait for the invitation and say that they've forgiven that person but still not initiate. And so because of that, the word becomes a completely different meaning. For that general discussion, and I think it's a very, very important discussion on forgiveness without contrition and all that kind of stuff, obviously the term forgiveness itself needs to be defined. But I just thought that might be an interesting thing there, that who we are is there from the beginning, and we might not know the ins and outs of ourselves, and we might get things wrong and go against our design, so to speak. But what we are is mostly there and instinctual. So my issue is this. School ended, sixth form kind of ended. The world became a huge mess. Like the millennials, I think, specifically really didn't have a good thing set up for them. Like the crash happened almost as soon as they were out of college or whatever, and so they've been told to follow their dreams and not study anything important for their whole lives. And then, oh, wait a sec, the light at the end of the tunnel's been turned out. We can't afford you to follow up your dreams. You should have done engineering. It's that kind of attitude from society, I think. And yeah, looking back now, I haven't done this a lot, but looking back and thinking of it, yeah, it was really confusing back then. It was really like I just didn't know what was going on. But throughout the life since that time, I've always had this idea that in order to keep relationships going, and maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, I always have to be the one initiating. And from a human design perspective, that is completely true. And I had this idea that these kind of generators or generator manifestors or whatever, I don't actually know any projectors, but these other types would be sitting around and might want to meet me, but because their generator type forbid them from initiating, they wouldn't actually be able to message or call or whatever. And while that does sound a bit nuts now I say it, in terms of how my life has worked out and how the strategy has been so powerful for me and how I've watched it in others repetitively, this has been a very strong subjective experience for me. It does make sense on those skewed terms. Plus, I overcommit to these sorts of ideas anyway. I take things that I read from the Law of One and over-applied them a bit too much when I was young. But anyway, I have this feeling that if I don't initiate, then these other people will be horribly disempowered, and that will be a horrible thing. And it's led to a lot of things. It's led to a lot of just silly behaviors. It's led to a lot of me over-explaining when I say something and the other person doesn't seem to respond or doesn't seem to appreciate it or whatever. Then I will explain in deeper reasons why we should be friends or something like that. And this attitude in general, I am a fairly positive person. I have been through some unpleasant things, I think, as we all have. But I have a general habitual, that was the word I was looking for there, habitual optimistic outlook. I generally seem to be positive, and this attitude of being absolutely fine, being the one to do kind of more of the initiating, and not being massively perceptive always of others' psychology, has led to situations where I will often turn up, be very positive, and people will be unpleasant gossip about me or whatever, and just make my life very difficult, be passive aggressive, and I won't kind of notice for a while. And this is the situation that I am sort of showing in this image here. Of course, it applies to all the types, but here I'm just referencing the generator. So I send energy out, and a healthy thing, healthy, who knows what that means, but assuming all things are equal, assuming there's no deep reason, something I'm doing wrong or whatever, that this shouldn't be flowing properly. The idea is I send out the energy, I initiate, that person is positive and responds well. And I have had that with some pure generators sometimes. But what is actually happening is this second one here. I send out the energy, and then the other person is passive aggressive, nasty, and kind of cuts it off. Like the interaction I had with them, maybe we did do something, but they were so unpleasant and negative that it is essentially like saying they don't like me, right? So this is being shut off. But then what happens? And this is why forgiveness without contrition doesn't work for me. They have said the thing, they don't like me, or they haven't even said it. Things have gone wrong. We wait around a little bit, and then I manifest again, I initiate again because of this entire belief system. I mean, this is codependence, isn't it, really? Very often, these messages have lasted years and the person has never particularly liked me. And I'm just saying that this can be a kind of trap that I would imagine manifestors in general can be caught in. Now, where is the issue? Where is the problem? Of course, the manifestor thing is correct. The generator, manifestor, projector, they do have a different strategy. Where is the issue here? Now, the issue here, I think, is my belief in their competence or something like that, or my lack of understanding of themselves and their strategy. So a generator, going back to our original thing here, has a sacral energy, right? So they are constantly producing energy, they are constantly working. And for me, it's no, that isn't the correct interpretation. It isn't they might like me and want to contact me, and because of their lack of ability to initiate, that doesn't work. This is just an incorrect idea. The correct idea is that the generator, with their sacral power, with their ability to interact with others, has every single thing they need, and that I do not need to interact with them. I do not need to try and improve their lives, and maybe I cannot improve their lives. I do, of course, relate positively to some generators, generator manifestors, etc. But to see myself as a necessary ingredient in their lives, or them a necessary ingredient in mine, or whatever, this is a very incorrect idea. And to assume that the generator is themselves, that they are completely happy being themselves, that they have all the resources they need, and to just, let them be, have nothing further to do with them. And there are many people in my life, at various times of my life, that have not liked me. And, they say the manifestor aura is repelling, or who knows. I would say it's probably because, I don't know, partly the illness, partly the fact that I'm very cerebral and I think about a lot of things where a lot of people want to chill more. But there needs to be some understanding of how to cut off this need to initiate, need to manifest. And it goes against the human design chart, because the human design chart says if you manifest as a manifestor, if you initiate, it will all be good. but technically you can initiate the wrong thing, right? You can initiate the wrong thing. You can try and insert yourselves where you are not wanted. And, that is life. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.